I'm very thankful because my neighbors about 7 doors up have bees. And so they pollinate and produce a lot of garden produce for us because the cucumbers have just gone crazy this year, zucchini, squash. So I decided to make relish. I remember eating relish when I was a kid at my grandma's house, and she used this grinder to make her relish. The patent on this, I kind of did a little bit of research, was from more than 100 years ago. Like it was 1897 when this was patented, I believe. The thing you need to remember about making relish or pickles or anything with cucumbers is you have to cut off the blossom end of that. If you don't cut off the blossom end, it produces an enzyme that makes everything a little bit softer. So your pickles are going to be softer. The relishes won't be quite as crunchy. So you cut those off, and then you literally just grind everything in here. I've got this on the coarse grind setting, and so when you grind that, I just put it on the coarse, and that way it gets it uniformly chopped, basically, without having to sit there and chop everything up. So I'm going to grind 4 cups of cucumbers, and then after I grind the cucumbers up, I'm going to be grinding the onions. I'll be grinding peppers. All of that will go in here. So I'm not going to make you watch me do all of that, but if you were to sit here and chop this up, it would take a really long time to do the exact same thing that this little workhorse does really fast. So I will be back in just a little bit to show you the next step of this process. Okay, here's the next step. We have everything all chopped up. It's ready to go. You want to take a relatively large bowl to put this in, and you'll add in your 4 cups of the cucumbers that have been finely chopped. You'll add in the cup of green pepper and the half a cup of red pepper into that. You'll add your 3 cups of the onion and the 3 cups of the celery. And you put this all in this big bowl, and then you mix this in and sprinkle it with salt. I love this spoon. I had a really tall spoon that I used to use when I make apple butter. My apple butter container, the pot that I use on the stove is super tall. And I was stirring one day and busted my spoon. So a family that went to our church, their son is an amazing woodworker, and he made me a new one. So I love this spoon. So anyway, just a big spoon, mix that in together. You actually sprinkle the salt on it. Now when you do salt, you want to make sure you're using a canning salt, not like a kosher or regular kitchen salt. You need to use this canning and pickling salt. There's other brands, but that's one of the brands out there. So you sprinkle that with salt, and then you cover all of this with cold water, and you let this sit for about 4 hours. I've got some ice cubes in there also, but mostly I just did that to get the water really cold. So this has to sit for the 4 hours, and then at 4 hours, then we'll come back and can this in the water bath canner. You do not have to pressure cook it. You just water bath can it. And so we'll come back later and do that portion of it. I did want to show you this all taken apart. So if you look online and you're looking for this, this is the coarse, the size of the coarse one. That's the one we use to grind all of these vegetables with. Everything cleaned out of it, and then rinsed it off with really hot soapy water, and I'm already letting it dry because I don't want it to rust, and you want this to last another 100 years. Okay, the relish mixture was soaking in that cold water bath for about 4 hours. I've since started letting that drain. I take a really fine sieve colander and just let it drip, drain completely. You really want to get all of the excess moisture out of that. So while that's continuing to drain, we're going to bring our brine to a boil. So you just take the 3.5 cups of sugar and put it in here, and I'm going to add in 2 cups of white vinegar. I'm going to turn that on. And then we're going to add a tablespoon of celery seed and a tablespoon of mustard seed. And we're going to stir all that together. and bring that to a boil, and then let the sugar completely dissolve. Once that sugar is completely dissolved, then we'll add in the relish mixture of the chopped up vegetables. In the meantime, I've already got my cans going in the canner. This is called a water bath canner. You don't have to pressure cook this. The acid in that vinegar has a high enough acid content that it makes it a safe canning practice just to use the water bath canner versus a pressure cooker. And I've already got my lids back here. They're staying warm, and all of my other items have been sterilized, including my funnel. And so once this comes to a boil and that sugar's dissolved, then I'll add in this relish, and I'll show you the next step in that process. Okay, this has been simmering to the point where the sugar is now completely dissolved. Now that that sugar is dissolved, I can add in the vegetable mixture to that. Again, it gave that extra time too. You want to kind of keep it draining that whole time because you really want to have all of the excess liquid drained off of those vegetables. And you just stir that in. And then I will continue to stir that occasionally, and I will simmer this for 10 minutes. Again, this is an easy relish recipe. Some relish recipes call for turmeric. You can add turmeric to yours if you want. There's a lot of great recipes out there. This is just the one that is a traditional one for my family to use. And so I enjoy it. It's something I've enjoyed for several years. I'm going to turn that up just a little bit to get those hot. So I'm just going to watch this really closely. When you're in the canning process, you don't really have the luxury of being able to leave the kitchen once you get to this stage. You really have to keep a close eye on everything. So we're going to watch this, let this simmer for 10 minutes, and then we'll be back to do the actual canning process. We're now in the stage of the process where we're getting ready to put it in the jars for canning. So canning is not hard. You just have to make sure you follow some safety guidelines. So everything is hot and sterilized. You want to make sure that you're working with sterilized jars, sterilized lids, sterilized utensils, because you don't want to introduce any bacteria. So all of these have been sterilized. I'm going to take a jar out of the canner. And these jar lifters are wonderful for that. You want to make sure you're doing it at that angle so that the water drips in between these and doesn't run down on your hand. If you angle it, it can run down on your hand and burn you really bad. So just make sure you've got that at the right angle. And then these funnels are wonderful. Helps you get everything into the jar where it needs to go. And it reduces it from spilling on the outside of the jar and making a mess. You can put these in pint jars. You can also do these in little jelly jars. We go through a fair amount of relish, so I'm putting these in pint jars. And you'll see, you really have a lot of work that you do. And you think, oh my word, that's not a whole lot of cans of relish. But it tastes so good. It tastes so good. Then you take a wet paper towel and you run it around the top of that canning jar. That does two things. One, it gets any vinegar or sugar off of there so it has a good seal. And two, it helps me check for any cracks in the jar. If the jar is cracked at the top, then I can't use it. And then I use this magnetic wand, and I pull my lid out, and then put one of my rings on it. When you do the rings, I put my fingers on either side of the middle. I don't actually put them on the middle because you don't want to create a false seal. You want that to seal by the air escaping out of that. Some of my jars are a little bit different shaped. Some of them I've had for a long time. So this one's a little more squared off. It's an antique jar, but it still works great. You can use these for years and years. That's a great thing about investing in canning products is, other than buying the new lids each time that you fill something, everything else is reusable. The jars and the rings and obviously the canner. So I will continue to fill these, and then I'll put these back in this, it's called a water bath canner. I'll put those back in here once these are all filled, and I will process this with the lid on and the water boiling, and I'll do that for 10 minutes. Shake that down a little bit more. So I will come back when we're to that process, and that way you can see what the finished canning process looks like as well. Okay, now that our jars have been in the water bath canner for 10 minutes, we're going to take them out and let them seal. This recipe produced 4 pints and 1 little 4-ounce jar. So that's what it looks like. I'm just going to set it here and let them cool. You want to make sure that when you are cooling your jars, you don't have any breeze blowing on them, because you don't want the change in temperature to cause the glass jar to break. If you heard that little pop, that was one of those jars sealing. Sometimes they seal while they're still in the canner. So all of that we just did made 4 of those, and then 1 of my little 4-ounce jelly jars. If you want to feel more productive, can them in these, because you get 8 jelly jars. I like to put a little bit in these, because if I barter with them or give some away, if someone doesn't really care for it, then I've not wasted a whole pint, and they can just try it to see if they like it. So that is canning relish, and it's a great way to use up an abundance of cucumbers and garden produce. Thanks for watching Mama Janna and Company. If you would like to see more videos like this, please like and subscribe and share